Hey guys, welcome to Protocoders Point. Okay, so this is the fifth part of our tutorial on creating S3 bucket-like service by making use of Node.js. So in our previous part, we have created an API route through which a user will be able to register himself into our database. Okay, so while registering his account, we have accepted a name, his name, that is the username, and then here in the code I have created an API key so that whenever he want to access our system, he can make use of API key to make use of our service. Okay, so I will just show you my MongoDB database. Okay, so this is the registered user, and you can see the API has been generated over here of this user. Okay, so now if a user want to use the service, he can make use of this API to use our service. Okay, so for that, in this part we are going to create a middleware. We are going to check if user passed API is valid or not. Okay, so this middleware will work as a authentication for the user. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so to create a middleware, over here I have created a folder called middleware. So here let's create a file and let's name it as auth.middleware.js. Okay, so here in this file we are going to create our middleware for authentication purpose. So here first of all we need to import some files, that is user model we need. So let me import it. Okay, so now let's create a function that will help us in authenticating. So for that I will just make use of export dot user auth. So this is the function that I'm going to create, async. So here in async function we need to accept three parameters. One is response, request, and next. Okay, so here in request we will get a requested data from the user, and this is used to response back to our front end or wherever this has been called. So we are going to make use of this, and this is been used to go to next step after this middleware. Okay, so here I have created user middleware, so I will just name it. Okay, so this is the function. So let me add a try and catch block over here. Okay, so if there is any error, so I will just print it on the screen. Okay, so now here in request the user will be sending his API key in the request.query. So let's accept the API key. So for that, const API key is equal to request.query.api key. Okay, and now here let's validate it, so that if user do not pass any API key, then we need to show a proper warning to the user. So here return request.json. Okay, so if a user do not pass anything, then we are just showing this message to the user that API key is mandatory. Okay, so now after checking this, we need to check if the API key exists in our database or no, and to which user it has been given. Okay, so for that we need to talk with our backend database. Okay, so here get user is equal to await. Okay, so here we have imported user model, so we will make use of it. So user model dot find one. Okay, so here if I go to this user model, you can see there is a API key in this schema. Okay, so we can make use of that. Okay, so API key, I just need to pass the API key that the user has sent. Okay, and if the user exists in our database, as you can see over here, so if this user exists, then this data will be passed from the database to this variable. Okay, so now let's do that. So if get user, so if it is null, so if this get user is null, then it means that user do not exist and this API key is invalid. Okay, so we can just show the message to the user that API key do not exist. Okay, and now if a user exists, then there will be some data in this, and this statement will not work, so it will just come over here. So now in request, I need to add this user. Okay, so that I can make use of request and do next task. Okay, so here what I will do is request dot user is equal to get user. Okay, and immediately I am just calling next function. So now what happens over here is all this data that is been stored in our database will be fetched in this variable, and as the user exists, we are going to store it in request.user, so that we can make use of request.user in next API or next function or next task of the API call by making use of this. Okay, so let me save this thing. Okay, so now what I will do is I need to check this middleware. So for that, what I will do, I will just go to this user route, and here I will just create one more API. So I will just name it as login, you can say. So I'm just using it for testing purpose. Dot post method, or you can just use get method also. I will just make use of log. Okay, post method. Okay, so now here request response. Okay, so let me make this function as a sync. Okay, and now here in between, so in this API call, that is route, I need to attach the our API. So middleware, I need to attach it over here. So for that, I need to import this file over here. So here I will just import it, require middleware, auth middleware. Okay, now let's attach it over here. So we'll just name it as auth. So we'll just sort it auth dot this function. Okay, and now over here, try and catch block I need to attach. Yeah, so log error. So in try catch block in request dot user, we will have a data after this task has been completed. Okay, so we can just do it. So if request dot user, so if there is any data in request.user, that means that we have passed this authentication middleware, and we have our user data in this variable. Okay, so now what I can do, I can just response the data on our front end. So return. Okay, so request.user. Okay, so let's check this by running our code. Okay, so you can see the message, it is running on 3000 port and MongoDB has been connected. Okay, so let me open my Postman. Okay, so to make the request here, let's change it to post method. So HTTP, okay, localhost 3000 port, our API route is login, and here we are going to pass a API key, something like this. So question mark. So this is a query, and this is the data, the key and value. Okay, so let me take the API key from my database. Okay, I will just paste it over here. Okay, so now if I hit this, you can see we get the data of a user in this success JSON format. Okay, so we have some completed our middleware where the user will be able to log in into our system and access our system by making use of API. Okay, so let me explain you one more thing. Okay, so here whenever this API has been called, so first this middleware will get executed, and here in this function I'm going to check if the user exists in the database or no. So if it exists, then we are going to get the data of the user and send it to the next task. Okay, so the next task is of this function is this thing. So this function is the next. So here in request.user, we get the user that is been added from the middleware. Okay, so yeah, so that's all for this video tutorial. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe. Proto Code as point. Thank you.